Almalexia, the Sacred Lady. She was a source of equal parts strength and mercy to the Dark Elves. As one of the three living gods of Morrowind, she was the caretaker of her people and the social butterfly of the Tribunal. Until she lost her mind, that is. Today we're taking a look at Mother Morrowind and her controversial rise and tragic fall from grace. To tell the story of Almalexia, I first have to yap a little about her late husband. The ancient Chimer houses were united under the leadership of Indoril Nerevar, the hero king of ancient Morrowind, or as it was known then, Resdayn. As golden as a Chiquita banana and with a jawline that could cut glass, Nerevar led the ancient Chimer people, and even forged an alliance with the Dwemer thanks to his good personal relationship with their leader, Dumak Dwarf King. Yes, he's the king of the dwarves and his last name is Dwarf King, I know. However, the alliance didn't last. After Nerevar discovered that the Dwemer were screwing around with a certain extremely powerful artifact under Red Mountain, a war ensued. The Chimer faced off against the Dwemer, and for some reason the Nords and Orcs as well, and it all culminated in the Battle of Red Mountain, which sounds kinda cool until you realize that a lot of the names surrounding Morrowind's lore are way too literal. No one knows exactly what happened, but after the battle, Nerevar was dead, the Dwemer disappeared, and the Tribunal were in control of the Heart of Lorkhan, a powerful artifact believed to be the heart of a god. And even though the Tribunal swore upon Azura herself that they wouldn't use the Heart of Lorkhan to make themselves powerful, they totally used the Heart of Lorkhan to make themselves powerful. And as a consequence of breaking their promise, and also probably killing Nerevar, Azura cursed the Chimer, turning their golden skin gray and their eyes red, and prophesying that one day Nerevar would return to kick the Tribunal's ass. Anyway, now that we know all that, we can finally get back to our main topic, Almalexia. After the wacky hijinks at Red Mountain, she and the other members of the Tribunal wasted no time. They instituted a new religion, claiming that the three once revered Daedra were merely anticipations of the Tribunal, who were now the true gods of Morrowind. The new religion would be known somewhat boringly as the Tribunal Temple, or just the Temple. The Temple was largely adopted by the Dunmer people, with the exception of the Ashlanders, who continued to follow the tradition of worshipping the three good Daedra, Boethia, Azura, and Mephala. While the more civilized Dunmer in the cities were persecuted for not following the new temple's beliefs, the Ashlanders were largely ignored by the Dark Elves as a whole, probably due to them being mostly nomadic tribal people who eat ash storms for breakfast. The Tribunal also conveniently left out the part where they were getting their power from the Heart of Lorkhan, choosing instead to claim that they had been given their power through being super virtuous and fighting evil and, don't worry about it. In order to reconcile the old beliefs of the Dunmer, Almalexia claimed to be anticipated by Boethia, the prince of deceit, conspiracy, and secret plots of murder, which if you've been following along is a little bit interesting given the murky circumstances of her husband's death. Little is known of Almalexia before her ascension. She was likely in some sort of position of power and belonged to one of the great houses of ancient Morrowind. The story goes that she met Nerevar while he was working as a guard for a merchant caravan, and when the two were married, Dumak, the king of the dwarves, gave them a pair of flaming swords known as Hope's Fire and True Flame, which were pretty badass I guess, but aside from that, not much is known about Almalexia's past. After her ascension to godhood with the rest of the Tribunal, Almalexia was loved by the people of Morrowind. She was known to be very personable, and even regularly walked around in public and presumably shook hands and kissed babies. She acted as Morrowind's protector and as the more personal, caretaking figure of the Tribunal. Some of her most famous exploits include banishing Mehrunes Dagon with the help of Sotha Sil after Dagon destroyed the city of Mournhold, and she also likely helped repel the invasion of Tamriel by the Akaviri, though the details of that story are a little unclear about the whens and wheres. She would also then go on to support the formation of the Ebonheart Pact, an unlikely alliance between the great houses of Morrowind, with the exception of Astalvani, and the Nords as well as the Argonians for some reason. This pact sought at first to serve as a defense against Akaviri invaders, then later as a defense against cultists of Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of being evil, basically. As it turned out, the Tribunal weren't the only ones sucking power from the heart of a dead god. In the depths of Red Mountain, a demon king was rising. Somehow, Dagoth-Ur returned, after a brief 3,000-year nap, and he would be the downfall of the Tribunal, and of course by extension Almalexia. Over the course of about 450 years, the Tribunal found it increasingly difficult to wallop Dagoth-Ur back to sleep, and were eventually unable to access the heart altogether, thus making it impossible to charge their metaphorical magical batteries. As a consequence of this wacky development, Almalexia became increasingly withdrawn and bitchier to those around her. She stopped walking among her people and doing all the baby shaking and hand kissing. Wait, reverse that. Presumably, she also started listening to Linkin Park and scrawling pictures of Sotha Sil in her diary with X's over his eyes. So let's talk about Dagoth. Before he was a jack dude with a Dwemer helmet, he was Vorin Dagoth, a high counselor, advisor, and despite the fanfiction I've seen, a strictly platonic friend of Nerevar. During the Battle of Red Mountain, Nerevar, Dagoth, and a small party of Nerevar's men made it to the stronghold beneath the volcano itself, containing the heart of Lorkhan. Upon entering, Nerevar engaged in combat with Dumak and killed him, becoming gravely injured in the process. It was around this time that Kagranak, the High Craft Lord of the Dwemer, in desperation, used the tools on the heart and all the Dwemer disappeared, but that's a story for another video. Despite his wounds, Nerevar wished to consult with Azura on what to do with Kagranak's tools, and so asked his good buddy Dagoth to safeguard them in the meantime. And this is where things get murky. While the rest of the details aren't consistent depending on the source, a few general things are pretty much agreed upon at this point. Nerevar left to meet with the Tribunal, making them swear to Azura that they wouldn't use the tools to obtain power, and Nerevar and Vorin died. According to the Ashlanders, the Tribunal, driven by their need for power, betrayed Nerevar, killing him and Dagoth, and took the tools for themselves. But according to Vivek, the Tribunal convinced Nerevar that they should keep the tools just in case. Dagoth then for some reason refused to relinquish the tools and was killed by Nerevar and his soldiers. And interestingly, Vivek doesn't specify how Nerevar died in his account. Either way, Nerevar died and the Tribunal got the tools. What the Tribunal didn't know is that Vorin Dagoth wasn't truly dead, and would soon become Dagoth, a devil lying in wait beneath Red Mountain for his once cherished friend's return. Returned to life and empowered by the magical energy of the heart, and completely insane, Dagoth started doing all kinds of cool stuff, like making people into weird elephant things and spreading blight storms. He also wanted to build a new version of Numidium so he could, quote, drive the mongrel dogs of the Empire out of Morrowind, which, while admirable, is kind of offset by the fact that he was brainwashing people and turning them into zombies. But as was predicted by the prophecies of Azura, the Nerevarine, Indoril Nerevar reincarnated, would soon come to chug 200 bottles of skooma and bash Dagoth's head in, simultaneously saving and undoing the Tribunal's reign once and for all. You see, the Tribunal and Dagoth shared the same source of power, and by the Third Era, the Tribunal found it harder and harder to contain Dagoth and all the ash storms and monsters he was cooking up. So they built a fence made of ghosts, called, wait for it, the Ghost Fence, powered by the souls of deceased Dunmer and the divine power of the Tribunal, which they figured would at least keep him and his ash hole at the center of Red Mountain contained, which it did, until it didn't. The beginning of the end came when Almalexia and Sotha Sil were attacked, and lost 2 out of the 3 of Kagranak's tools to Dagoth. Almalexia and Vivek, the 2 most chatty members of the Tribunal, both soon after retreated from public appearances, likely grappling with the coming loss of their power. I guess Sotha Sil was too busy playing VR chat and building robots to care though. The Nerevarine soon after defeated Dagoth and melted the magical candy center of the heart of Lorkhan, simultaneously killing Dagoth for good and unbinding the source of the Tribunal's power. Almalexia, facing the reality of her loss, went bananas. She sent the Nerevarine to kill Sotha Sil, framing Sotha for the attacks on her own city, but when he arrived, Sotha was already dead, killed by none other than Almalexia herself. Almalexia then tried to commit the first ever case of reincarnated domestic violence on the Nerevarine. She failed and was struck down, a sad end to a sad story of madness and betrayal. After Almalexia's death, the temple was thrown into disarray. 2 of the 3 members of the Tribunal were dead, and Vivek had disappeared. Not that it mattered anyway, since his power was likely almost gone at that point. This was an especially unfortunate outcome for those who lived under Bardau, the meteor that Vivek had kept suspended over his city as a not-so-subtle flex and perhaps also a not-so-subtle threat. As the power that kept Bardau suspended in the air above Vivek's city weakened, some smart guys decided to forge a pact with the Daedric prince Clavicus Vile, who helped them create the Ingenium, a device that kept the Big Rock from obliterating the city. It also had the unfortunate side effect of needing souls to function. And as we know, when you make a pact with a Daedric prince, nothing ever goes well. So when one of the designers of the Ingenium tried to save his lover from being harvested by the soul-sucking device, it was destroyed, and the meteor hit the city with its full original momentum, turning Vivek's once holy city into a big ash crater. The impact also caused Red Mountain to erupt, destroying all of Vardenfell and part of mainland Morrowind as well. This event became known as the Red Year, and was widely regarded as not a very fun time. In the wake of the Red Year, the temple was forced to forge a new path forward, without the guidance of their gods. Vivek had predicted that the temple would once again embrace the three good Daedra, which they eventually did, relegating the former gods of the Tribunal to saint status, a consolation prize to those who still held their old faith, no doubt. There were pockets of Dunmer who retained faith in the Tribunal, but as a whole, the Dark Elves seemed to be fine with rolling back the clock to their old gods. Out with the gold and blue, in with the old and new. Almalexia's story is one of great pride. She was ultimately undone by her need to be loved, and facing the prospect of a world where she wasn't seen as a god, she went berserk. Her story reminds us that true strength comes from within, not from having dope godlike powers. If she had accepted this fact, perhaps she wouldn't have been killed by her ex. That just about does it for today's video. Thank you for watching. Once again, I'm Shade, and until next time, stay curious.